Awesome, awesome.
Hey everybody, so today I'm doing something different. I am going to be talking to a fellow dungeon master, game master, and we're going to be talking about what they do. What they do with their projects, like how they run games, because there's no perfect way to run a game. There's many ways to achieve the same results. So you don't have to take my advice. Just take some advice and go with it. And so welcome, Cole. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Cole. You'll see me on here listed as ColTheDM. I just made that today, so there's not a lot of folks on there. But if you want to start following me on there, maybe I'll start pushing stuff if the numbers get big. But no, I'm Cole. I've been DMing for a good number of years now, pushing like 8 or 9. Super on and off on stuff, but very much a 5e player. And yeah, no, love the game, love teaching new players, cool stuff.
Great to hear. Like, I'm really excited to have you on. I walked into a comic book shop and saw you running a game for new players,
Hmm.
which was really interesting. And I could tell right away it was new players, but you had them really excited. They were
Hmm.
like just loving it. And then I like kind of just like sneakily sort of walked around the table and stuff. And then I heard you going,
Yep.
all right, so like tell me how you smashed the head of the Rat King with your fist or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's great, because you got them involved, you got them thinking about role playing, you got them
Hmm.
thinking
Hmm.
outside their sort of. I mean, had these people ever role played before?
No, see, so that table in particular, we did at our shop. We did like a class to teach players how to play and like start a character from scratch. So that player in particular had never looked at a book before. They said the only D&D experience they had was just looking at some videos on the way to the shop that day. And so like it started with like a really ground level floor with him and his friend, and we were able to build them up. And to that, I sometimes it, like we know this is the dice tell the story for us. That moment you walked in on, he crit on the last hit on that Rat King, and I was
Nice.
like,
Yeah.
it couldn't for a new player, it couldn't have been
Right.
a better experience. That 20 hit the table, they start cheering. That's all it takes. Everybody's
What a
hooked, and no,
heroic
it was
moment, right? For that guy,
seriously, no,
He
seriously,
gets to
no.
be the
We had
hero.
a we had a table full of people that have only been playing for like at most a month between one of them, and so like having them all just like jump in pretty new with a bunch of new faces they haven't met was a really good session.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
everybody was loving it. Like they were
Hmm.
cheering, like they were high-fiving each other, I think. They were just like really into it, which is what you want with a game, right?
You do.
I mean, like
No, it's yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, it's one of those things where you hope that what you're doing and the things that you're pushing will be engaging for these folks. The last thing you want is to look around the table and just have people, hands on their heads, look at their phone and stuff like that. But you get a couple people hooked in, and if at least one or two are enthusiastic about it, the whole table gets involved. And then once the whole table's involved, they're cheering at the cool thing one of them did or the funny thing that you decided to send as a DM. And no, it's cool.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it is really great because, uh, I tell like part of my channel is about
Yeah.
like, it's shared storytelling and you want everybody to have fun, including
Yeah.
yourself as a DM. And part of the
Hmm.
joy that I get from DMing is like seeing that kind of reaction to a story that I'm sort of leading. You're like the
Hmm.
leader of the story, and to see people reacting that way, it's like, yes, it's like it feels really good.
Yep. Yep. No, see exactly. You touched the nail on it. Perfect. Of the telling stories together. It's the collaborative storytelling of the thing. Like I want my players to come forward, even if it's just a simple one shot. Come forward with at least like a mini story of like why you're doing this thing, and that can like drive a couple fun role play things, or at very least. When you punch the Rat King, you do it really cool with your brass knuckles. You know what I mean? So no, it works out really well that if you are able to tell the story together, people fall into place so easily. They do.
That's very true. Yep. So, all right, a little background. How long have you been GMing?
Yeah, I've been in the space for about like 8 or 9 years. If I had to put into time of like actually me doing DM stuff of real time, probably like 3 years. But that's because like the off and on of the kind of thing. But
Yeah.
no, I've been enjoying it for a good number of years. When I started back in my first year of undergrad, And I started with 3.5, which if you talk to anyone that's probably millennial or older, they'll say that's some of the best Dungeons and Dragons you can play. I liked it a lot, but when I was introduced to 5th edition shortly after that, that's when I really started falling in love with it, because not only was it like a really simplistic system, but as like a DM for me, learning that to teach others was also super easy. I tell anyone to look at the skill list of 3.5 versus 5, and it's like, yeah, it makes sense that they condensed it a little bit. Like,
It was crazy, right?
Yeah, but no, I've been in the space for a little bit. I've had my downtime as well as my very rampant D&D time, which is kind of right now. But no, it's been a fun time.
That's good. And so, this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you. Like, what's your sort of philosophy about being a game master? Do you have like one thing you try to do, or one thing you're trying to accomplish, or maybe it's multiple things?
I think it's kind of usually multiple things, but like if you like boil it down to like one kind of mantra or philosophy I kind of stand by, it's sharing joy at the table. Like, we're all here to have a good time. We're all here to express ourselves in this space the way that we like. And if my joy can coincide with yours, they'll push together very well. And that's what I usually like to see, is when it's the collaboration of the thing. We're a table of folks. And so being able to all of us come together and tell stories and be joyful in that is what I do it for.
I agree completely. I mean, that's the thing, you know, it's a collaborative game where we're just trying to have fun, you know, and it's like, why would you even play it if it's not fun?
Genuinely, no. And being able to take the stories we learn and retell them in ways of our own, and being able to tell them in ways that have maybe better or more accessible reach to people, because some people don't see those stories that you're telling again, and being able to share those stories with somebody is really important, and I think is can be very powerful in the space.
Yeah,
I think so.
Absolutely. Okay, so how do you prep for like, how do you prep a game? How do you prep a game for new players, and is it different from how you prep a game like normally?
I would say anytime I'm starting out stuff for brand new players, I think it's very important to lead them into a lot of things. If I go to a table of players that are like level like 8 to 10, they're used to the thing, they know what they're doing. I'm not going to call out as many skill checks. I'm not going to say, do this for me. I'm going to let them do it, because they know their skill list. They know what to push for. If they hear somebody talking, they know just to roll an insight check to make sure they're lying just on the baseline. But people won't know that.
Always,
new players
automatically,
tend to not,
automatically. Is this person
lying?
lying?
Check. Exactly. But no, I'll have new players that will kind of, you know, go through the motions of me, you know, talking. They kind of talk back and they go, okay, what's next? And so sometimes I'll throw in like a really obvious lie. I'll be like, so like throwing in those obvious lies, like, I think they're lying. And I'm like, well, you should roll an insight check on that and figure it out.
Good, yeah.
Or like for like the opening, if I'm doing an opening scene, I'll have like 2 or 3 checks in there. Like I'll throw a history and a couple perception in there, just like get the bones rolling and get people kind of used to the idea of using their skills whenever I'm doing stuff. They can call that stuff out as they will. And it's showing them the structure and the bounds of the thing, especially while us as DMs are you know, rambling and doing our word talk, is really important for them, because it can be easy for new players to just start hearing me narrate and shut down and wait for narration to end.
Yeah.
And sometimes they can glaze over and stuff like that. But if you show them that using their skills and tools in between that can be really useful for them, and it keeps them engaged.
Yeah. Is that how you try to make them feel more comfortable? Because I know a lot of, like, the problem that I find with new players is they're just not comfortable with role playing, you know, or like stepping into the role of like a character.
See, and that's definitely something that I've like worked with some people, because like there are some people that like you know, I'll give them the, well, what do you say? And they kind of have that hesitation. I'll usually read that hesitation and either like guide them through non-acting, non-role-playing way of like what they want to say. And then I'll use my narration to say, they say that thing like this. And that kind of helps them. Yeah. Like you can just like, you don't have to have a character voice doing a thing if they're not ready for it. You can just say that that's how it goes to the narration. And that's an accessible way for people who aren't used to that role playing or that improv of the thing to like still get the words they want to say with the point across. It usually works that way for me.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So you just re-describe it like, okay, your character says this.
Exactly, and then I
Nice.
move right on with my NPC and their response to that.
Nice. Very
And
cool.
kind of like what I exactly, and kind of like what I said before for like comfortable with role playing. I think part of the thing is when I do those, those perception checks that I make the players do. For the ones that succeed, I obviously tell them, what I have written on the page, what the DC was. But for the ones that fail, especially if they fail kind of low, you make that a moment that's funny, and you go, well, you see that the bark on the tree looks really rough. You know
Uh-huh.
what I mean? And you're
Right.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't give them flavorful details. You give them funny details and like things where it's like, oh, I rolled bad. That doesn't mean that like nothing happens. That just means you usually get something jokey about it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
you I'll give something
That's
else
a
if
that's a
it's
valuable
if
thing.
it's
Like if you roll a one
yeah.
on a perception or whatever, it's like you still see stuff. It's just, you
Exactly.
know, like I know players like to joke when I had a bunch of new players, when I first moved out to Arizona and like had new players that I brought in from work, they had never played D&D before. And they learned about perception and they would roll a one and they're like, well, I see nothing. And I'm like, no, clearly you do see something. You just might not pick up on details that
Yeah.
otherwise you would have picked up on had you rolled higher. It doesn't mean you're just like blind
Your
or
eyes don't
whatever.
go black. You don't glaze
Yeah.
over. No, exactly.
Right,
Oh
right,
man.
right, right. So, do you have any tools that you use for prep specifically?
Tools that I use for prep, I think like if I'm the internet is a great tool. I just like look up different monsters and stuff. For me, my prep is pretty sporadic.
Mm, mhm.
I say like for like I will like if I'm prepping for a week, if I don't have anything prepped, I'll probably do like a 5 hour just like sit down with some of my favorite music and just like really hard to the paint, prepping stuff, setting up a structure, things like that.
Sure.
But like tools that I use, I'll use like a map editor if it's free, or like different PDFs of different books and stuff if it's free. But I usually try to let the things that I know shape what I'm doing, and then use the tools to kind of fill that in.
Yeah.
I'll make a monster that does something cool, and I'm like, well, now I need to make sure the CR makes sense and the damage and stuff. I'll just look up a CR5 monster and I'll fill the space where I need to be. So that's usually how I work with like different DM tools and things like that. I should use the DMG more, but I don't even own one. That's the big issue for me is I don't look in that big bad purple book enough. I really don't.
I only have a digital copy of the
Yep.
DMG. Well, the from the new edition, the latest DMG. I only have a digital
Oh,
copy,
sure.
right? But like, it's not really necessary, honestly. I mean, you can DM without it, unless you're looking up a
Mm-hmm.
very sort of obscure rule or something like that. There's really not a lot of purpose for that.
Mm-hmm.
Setting up a campaign, if you're like homebrewing a campaign, then yeah, the DMG is very, very useful. But
Yes.
you know, or if you're trying to find particular like magic items or something like that, or
Exactly.
or trying to enact some obscure, like sort of like seldom used rule, then yeah, it's definitely handy.
Yep. No, see that, and that's so funny because I'll sit there and I'll be like creating things for my games. I'm like, God, I'm really racking my brain trying to think of a cool magic item. And I go, no, I could just type in cool magic items, and I'll have
Yeah,
the
yeah,
biggest list
right.
I want.
I
I don't have to
mean,
sit here
yeah,
and
Google
reinvent the wheel or
Google
anything like that.
exists now, right? So it's
Yeah,
like a lot
exactly,
easier to do
exactly.
stuff with that.
Great tool for us DMs that
Right,
hit
yeah,
a
yeah.
brain fart stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I always have that open. Like I DM with an iPad, and so I always have
Yeah.
it like I can handily look up something real quick, which is great, you know. Um,
Mhm.
so
Absolutely.
tell me a little bit about like how do you go through a session with new players? Do you do a session zero? Do you work with their do you work their backstory? Like, do you have safety measures, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. No. So session zero is exactly. I usually anytime I get a new table together, unless I'm doing like a one shot on the spot, I'll
Sure.
do like a really quick version of a session zero. But like if I'm starting a new campaign with a new set of folks that I haven't really met before, or that like they haven't met each other, I'll do a session zero. I'll get everybody together in a neutral place, um, either at where we'll play, depending on if it's like a location, or like at my house where we can all just like hang out and be chill. It really works to sit them down and like introduce yourselves, kind of like just be you want to be people, you want to be friends, you want to know the players at your table, because uh, part of part of D&D is finding the table that works for you. And if you find
Hmm.
players that
Yeah.
don't necessarily all meld well together, or like in those really initial stages, you're seeing people that are, you wouldn't work well together as a DM. You can make the session zero is a good space to do that before you get like too deep in the paint. There's nothing worse than when you're in the middle of Act One and you're like, I might have to kick you from the table. Usually things don't get that crazy, but like if that does, it's good to see those. It's good to see those pitfalls at the beginning. But so like you set up that session zero, you meet up, you go through not only like what your world kind of overview is, or at least like the general vibe of it, but like also a little bit of table setting to ensure that when people are creating their characters, typically at session zero, they're able to take that and enrich their own backstories with that. Or if they're starting from ground zero and don't have any backstory even thought of, session zero is a great place to like sit down with them one-on-one and be like, okay, what class, what race, where do you live, what does that tie to? Get all those details kind of fleshed out now, because if you're able to one-on-one with those players at that session zero, it makes it really easy for me and really easy for them to just like jump into the thing and feel alive in the space.
Yeah.
And you also talked about like fail safes and things like that. I like to run a yellow and red card system where like a yellow card is where like there's a slight uncomfortability, something is kind of moving in a direction you don't like. We'll throw it, you'll call out or show a physical yellow card, and that I'll do like a quick diverge from whatever kind of subject matter we're on to just kind of jump back, keep going with play. A yellow card is like, we don't need to pause anything, but like this is starting to go a direction I'm uncomfortable with. With red card, that's an immediate stop at the table. We pause all role play, we pause all gameplay, and we sit down and we hash it out as people. We're all people first. Like people are affected by different things, and being able to healthily navigate that as a group will ensure the group's life. It'll stay longer, and there will be less breakout moments if that kind of stuff goes untested, unchecked. So
right. And I mean, if somebody is like at like a red card, like I do, just like sort of a system of not X's and O's, but sort of I let my players know that they can just check in anytime or stop anytime if they want, and hopefully they feel comfortable enough like saying stuff, because I'm very clear about that in session zero. That,
absolutely,
but like, if you get into a point where something's a red card for somebody in your game, and I know you haven't had one of those yet, thankfully, but it's like that means somebody's not having a good time, which defeats the purpose of what we're doing. So it's really important to have those sort of measures, because that's the thing. You want everybody to have a good time,
Yeah. No, and like you said, like even though it can be hard sometimes to hope that players will have the trust enough in us as DMs or GMs to come with us with those uncomfortabilities, even if you have it where it's not during session, if you bring up the opportunity to, they're going to contact you after session at the very least. That's what they'll do. They'll know that you're safe enough to come to with issues, and they'll either do it during session if they're daring enough, or if they're like, that's too uncomfortable for me, that's fine. Just chat with me up after the fact and we'll solve it.
Yeah,
that usually goes the right way.
Which leads into something else, because when we were talking earlier, you were talking about how you do check-ins with your players. So tell me a little bit about that.
No, so what I usually like to do is as not only just like for comfortability in the overall space of us being people kind of thing, also just like the enjoyment of the game, like I like to do like either every like level or so, like level 1 to level 2, it's usually only session 1 I get there. It's like I'll check and be like, hey, how's session 1 go? You know what I mean? But usually at every, since I do milestone based level up instead of XP, usually when I hit a level up, I go, okay, we're at this kind of next part in the story. I ain't paying attention to all that XP stuff. That's way too many numbers.
No, I never but I'm always I love milestones. So it's like,
but no, like we hit like level 3, level 4, and I'm like, hey, now that you're at this next step in the story, you're probably unlocking some cool stuff for your character. How's that all feeling? How's your class feeling? How are you feeling in the game? How's the story kind of like catching you? If it's not fun, I'll take their opinion on that, and I'll shift depending on if I feel I need to, or if like there's a majority of people saying it, I will shift it pretty heavily. Then. Like as DMs and GMs, we need to not be afraid to shift to adjust for our players as within our own boundaries. I think as a DM also, if you have a table where you're not getting along, you can step out as a DM as well. There's no need for you to continue to force a game for people that you're not having fun with, or just in the space. You know what I mean?
Totally, yeah.
But no, and I'll also do like a check-in at like big story moments, like the end of Act 1 boss fight. I'll be like, all right, now that boss fight is over, how do you all feel kind of about Act 1 as we transition into these next few steps? of the things you want to switch. One thing I like to keep open for my players is if they're not liking a class that they're playing, I do like the Withers from Baldur's Gate 3, and I'm just like, screw it, you can just change it. Like it's not
Right,
that
right,
deep.
right,
Like
right.
as long as it doesn't obliterate your backstory, you can just be a warlock now. It's not that deep. Like we'll figure it
Sure,
out. And
sure.
usually you can tie in some cool story stuff with that to make it all make sense. So no, that's
Yeah,
another thing
that's a
that I
good
just like I allow my
that's a
players.
good opportunity to like sort of invent some story elements as to why they changed or whatever. And it could be really, it
Exactly.
could lead to something really cool. You never know. Yeah, but that's really good
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
if a player is not going to like their class, if they're not going to like their character, again, the whole fun thing, they're not going to have fun. And like, what's the point? Like, we're all here to
Mm-hmm.
have fun. So, yeah, that's great. Like,
Exactly.
speaking of that, so have you ever had, and you talked about this, like you can just quit at any moment. Like if you're not having
Yeah.
fun, and if it's truly not the right campaign for you or whatever, like some people don't mesh or they don't click with the story, and it's no one's fault, but like the players and DMs can quit anytime they want if they're not
Yeah.
feeling it, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know? And so
Mm-hmm.
have you ever had to like fire a player, or has a player ever quit on you?
That's a good question. I've had like one thing I forgot in my intro is I used to live in Wisconsin before I moved out to Arizona on a whim, which was very fun. But when I used to live out there, I had a table where we all were kind of melding well, and there was this kind of pivotal moment where there was a moment where like the role play got a little hot, and we all took a moment. We said, "Hey, we're all cool, right? We're all just like people playing a table game." We had to take a moment to kind of breathe, and there was a moment where one of the players said, like, "I'm going to take a break from the group for a little bit, just because like I'm coming into these, I'm getting a little hot, and then I want to come in with a fresh character and start new because this character is not working." We did something like that, not necessarily like a fire or a quit, but like a reshift of the moment of the character in the game, and like that went okay before that group disbanded for
Hmm.
for busyness reasons.
Yeah, yeah.
I did have another scenario where one of the players, like, one thing about D&D is I the energy that you feel from people around the table, even if you don't see any glaring issues, you can just tell that like you're not commingling with this person enough.
Right.
And I'm not someone who's like don't have any abrasion, but when I had four players coming up at me and like this person is like not really melding with the group and was even leaning towards some uncomfortability moments.
Yeah.
You do have to sit down and be like, hey, we appreciate your time here, and it was really great to have you as a player, but my
Right.
table is going to be full after this. It's going to be one of those things of like we're going to have to shift you to a different table, and it can be really tough to do that because like if there's nowhere to shift them to, or like this person in particular, which is like really
That's
happy to
hard.
be part of playing the game again. They've been
Yeah.
playing it for years, and they were an old school player, and so being like, sorry, just this shift, this difference in a couple different things. I like for my table of the majority, I'm going to have to ask you to find another table. And it was a tough conversation. And after that initial conversation, I talked to that individual later, and I said again, I'm like, hey, it was nothing personal. It was just how the
Yeah.
table was supposed to go,
Yeah.
and we were cool after that.
Yeah, you
It's
just
all
don't want
people
them to
trying to
think it's
navigate.
personal. It's not personal. It's just,
Exactly.
and
It
it's,
never is.
yeah,
No,
it never
it
is.
isn't.
Never is. I mean, well, maybe sometimes, but not
Maybe sometimes
majority, but
there's there's
majority of the time
there's
it's not
moments where
personal.
it can be.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
people can make it personal, but it shouldn't be personal.
Yeah.
So it's not that
It
kind of
should, and
thing.
I think for those moments where they are personal, I think it's okay to just like sit down and have like try to have a civil conversation with the person and move to those next steps.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if it's a situation where there's no civil discussion to be had, then you also don't owe it to them to sit down and have a civil conversation. You can just
No, you can
kick
walk
them out of the
away.
group or whatever
You
you
can
need to
walk
do.
away. You
I
just do
think
your thing. Yeah.
there's different situations. Every situation is different. Every situation deserves its own amount of
Right,
grace necessary for it. And
right.
so for me, I've been able to approach most of those kind of situations with some grace and be able to kind of exit in a positive way. But in those situations where you can't, they're also valid. That's also what you got to do. That's also how the game works. The thing that can turn people off of the hobby the quickest is being part of a group that they don't vibe with,
Hmm.
or being part of a group that's actively harming them in any way.
Yeah,
And so when you run
yeah.
into those situations and you feel trapped and you just stick it out, you'll find that those are the people that say, yeah, I tried it and I didn't really like it.
Didn't like it.
I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
really see it
because
anymore.
yeah, and they don't
Yeah.
even know why necessarily. It's just they felt that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They don't
Yep,
necessarily even know
exactly.
that they felt that. Yeah. Like
No, truthfully.
yeah. So how so kind of related, like say you have a
Mm-hmm.
player that disagrees with one of your rule interpretations, right? Like I'm sure this has happened.
Yep.
This has happened to every DM, right?
Yeah.
And it like sometimes can get heated, right?
Yep.
Because it's like a pivotal
Uh-huh.
moment or whatever, and they're just like, oh, this, and it's like just the wording, because we all know how raw is sometimes like, it can be interpreted a
Mm-hmm.
couple of different ways, right? Although they're
Yep.
usually very specific with their wording, but sometimes they kind of miss it a little bit, right? Like, what do you do? How do you handle that situation?
So there's a couple different ways that I've kind of seen this. One of the primary examples that I go to is there was a moment where my players circumnavigated a big boss by capturing him instead of doing anything else beforehand.
Okay.
And and how in my story it was supposed to go is this character, not if not killed in that battle, was going to then be assassinated by this group that doesn't want him alive, spilling his secrets. And so they had him locked up and watching him because they wanted to question him about these secrets. And I had a moment where a druid assassin snuck in as an animal and administered poison to this man that, as they like to call it, DM poison, which it was. This person then got turned into goo and could no longer be revived or tell them how to any of those secrets. And
Yeah,
it was
getting
it was
turned
a
into
moment that
goo
I
does
gave.
that to one.
Right. And it was one of those moments where I allowed them, they were in the situation, so they had every opportunity to stop it. It's just that 5 people at a table rolled bad to stop this person. It was really unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and there was a moment where this assassin was prone on the ground and shooting a crossbow. And I had them just roll, and one of my more rules lawyery people at the group, I call him that all the time. He won't take it personally. But he was like, they get disadvantage while prone, don't they? And I went, you're right. And it's
You're
those
right.
situations where
Yep.
I'll get called on that in the spot, and 90% of the time I'll give it to the player, especially because like for how I DM rule of cool is 90% of what I roll with.
Yeah, yeah.
If there's something
Right.
in the book that they
I
read that
agree.
they know, we'll go with that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like no, they're like, no, this is what I read in the thing. I'm like, you know what, you're right. I'm going a little too loose. It helps structure me a little bit. I feel
Yeah.
like if I have a player that kind of pushes that to a degree, it helps keep me in the thing, and it helps keep players feeling like they still have control through the game mechanics. And so like when I'm faced with people who are really pushing against like a rules decision I've made, I usually will give it to them unless it's like really pushing the boundaries.
Right. Yeah.
Or if they want to do something specifically that's outside of kind of the realms of the thing, or like they go against my ruling, I'm like, okay, you can do that, but like I want you to think of something out of the box to kind of make it make sense of why you'd be able to do that. And then if they do, I'll reward them with an easier check to succeed, and possibly even an inspiration. Because I feel like if people come in with the new ideas and the interesting things, that should be rewarded more than punished, even if it punishes us or what we were planning.
Right. Yeah. 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 I totally agree. The rule of cool is sort of, because not every DM knows all the rules. Like even Jeremy Cameron doesn't know all the rules. Like the creators of D&D don't even know all the rules. They when they run games, I've heard stories about them having to look up rules before. And they wrote this
Yep.
book, so like just like us who weren't involved in the making of this, how are we going to know all these rules? We're not, and so
Exactly.
and it's like, it's such a thing when you have to go, oh, let me look up this rule. It breaks the flow. And sometimes you're just like, look, we just got to get with the flow. So I'm going to make a ruling
Mm-hmm.
here and I'll look it up later, but we're just going to go with this.
Yep. I haven't run into personally too many like moments where they're like, no, I want this. I need look up the page 245 looking
Right.
section.
Yeah.
I haven't had too many moments like that because usually I don't push against my players that hard. But you're so right in those situations where like you start to break the flow. You look like, man, we've been looking at this book for like 10 minutes
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
You know what? You're right.
I
Just take
feel
it.
like,
We'll stay at work.
yeah, I feel like players are receptive. If you're just like, look,
Yeah.
I don't know, like you might be right. I might be right. We're going to look this up later. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to go this way. right? And then if we find out later out of session or when we have like a break or something, we can look this up, investigate further. If we find out it's the other way, then going forward, I'll rule the new way, according to
Yeah,
what we found out. But yeah, I don't want to break the
exactly.
flow. Let's, for the sake of argument, let's just agree to go with this decision, right?
And that, where I feel like that usually works more often than not. That'll usually get the players there. It keeps the flow going. For the players that do care, they feel vindicated and heard. For the players that don't care, they're like, finally, we can play again. So no,
Hmm.
I think that usually just works.
Yeah, yeah, totally,
Mhm.
totally. Uh, and you said you do, when you prep, you do more improv, right? Like you kind
I
of improv
definitely do.
games.
No, I really, really do. It's one of those things where I feel in the pocket of making stuff up on the fly. I usually do. I do a decent enough job to tie it in with what I'm already working on, or at least it's funny. You know what I mean? If you can get a
Hmm.
laugh at the
Yeah,
table, it doesn't matter how like story driven it is. It's gonna work.
right,
And in my prep, I'll eat like, due to the campaign that I'm kind of running the most right now. It's based on one of the gods of chaos, and so allowing for
mhm,
more chaoticness to kind of exist in the world makes sense and flows really
right.
well with my DM style of being more improv. And so like
Did you do
I'll
that
I'll prep
purposely
out
so you
like
could fit your DM style into
I
there a little
mean,
bit?
it's funny because I didn't at first, but man, oh man, it really works. I'm like, man,
Works out, yeah.
that Chaos Titan is going to be in most of my campaigns, I think, because he makes it. Well, because then it also allows me to really get a little silly with it, because I had a for one of my campaigns I did, I had they were clearing out a dungeon and they entered like a barracks, and it turns out this is the barracks of the D&D version of WWE wrestlers, and so I had a bunch. I had them fight 4 knockoff WWE wrestlers, with one of them just being John Cena, but he was invisible because of the bit. And it was this really funny moment where these ghostly wrestlers could appear, and like they had a spectral ladder match where when they got the belt, it was a real item that was a match. It was a really cool moment. And one of my more locked into the story and the rules lore kind of player like chuckled and went, what, when I said, like, like a WWE announcer mic came down. So like tying, and like that was
Nice.
then like later that session I tied in kind of the god of chaos and that kind of stuff. And so like a lot of that stuff kind of fleshes out. But letting yourself kind of like live in the wackiness, the zaniness, and the fantasy of it can really push for some hilarious moments and memorable moments for the players.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So just a reminder to people watching, like if you have any questions for either of us, please type it in the chat and we'll be more than happy to answer questions. Uh, and because we're about halfway through this interview, but I want to press on. So, because I'm really excited because you're bringing up some interesting things and you're making me think of some new ways to sort of do things. Like I think
Yeah.
these discussions with fellow DMs are important for that, to sort of give you new ways to sort of think of how to run your own sessions, and
Yeah.
it's also good to be a player because I get a lot of stuff, like I play in a game and I get a lot of good stuff out of the DM that I play with and how he
Mhm.
runs his games, which is very different from how I run my games, but both I hope mine are enjoyable, but his is definitely enjoyable. So how do you get your players to care about the world that you're making? Like, do you
Mhm.
like to tie in their backstories to the world, or what do you do to get them to sort of really want to be part of that world and buy into this like fiction that you're creating, that you're helping create with them?
I think a lot of that is necessary, and I think, and I like tying in their backstories to the thing. I think a lot of that is necessary, and I think even if you do it not as deep, like there are some players that they'll tell me, like at session zero. Again, session zero is such a critical moment for a DM and a player, I think, because when they're giving you their backstory and you're kind of working back and forth with them, you're asking them questions, they're asking you stuff. You can really start to flesh out in your own head how it ties into your thing. Is the big bad evil person who's trying to clear cut forest, did they destroy the forest that my druid character said
Right,
started their whole story? Their for
right,
their home forest burned down with their parents inside of it. Well, then of course my big bad evil guy was the one who kind of started that whole thing off, and
right,
it makes it really easy to kind of like push them into it, and like they're like, my drive is I want to find the answers. You start to sprinkle in those answers where they need be, and you start to fill out what that is. So I think like to get them into your world, not only do you want to have like at least something that's interesting to them, but you want to give them the reasons they're doing the thing. You know
Right.
what your world is when
Yeah.
they tell you that they were part of a kingdom of dragonborn that fell due to some unknown reason. You tie that into you either create some kind of famine or something in the world that caused that downfall, or you put a guy that made that decision to take it down.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And either of those answers will tie the players into the backstory and will make them wanting to learn more. We want our players to push to understand more about what we're doing, because the more they know, the more they can create and give gifts back and forth.
Yeah, you want them to ask questions about the world, right? Like to be curious
Exactly.
about it. Yeah. And so giving gifts, explain giving gifts to me, because you mentioned this like when we talked
I do.
earlier.
Yeah, there's if we're talking about my philosophies, another one that I like to say a lot is the ability for as DM and player to give gifts back and forth.
Mm,
And what I kind of view that as, that can be kind of an improv style language. It's the yes anding. It's giving us some ammo to work with in our story. It's kind of like what I referenced a couple times. If you tell me that you were part of this kind of growing kingdom of Dragonborn and they suddenly end, how that there's infinite things I could put in there that would have
right.
caused
Right.
that or not caused that I can tell you that caused that. Like and with that, I'll give back to them. Well, who was like your mentor growing up? Did you ever see what happened to them? Did you see them die in the battlefield? Where did you black out and you have no idea who's alive or if any of them are? I give that stuff back to them and talk about asking questions. If I
Mhm.
just ask them spitfire questions like that, one of them is going to be the right one. They'll
Yeah.
have to figure that out.
Right.
And it's their, and since it's their backstory and what they want to learn, they start to ask themselves that, and then they go, now I really am going to pay attention when they start mentioning these different things, because that I planted those seeds of
Mm.
questions in their heads that I as a GM I'm gonna ask myself as I'm crafting the story with both of us, but that I hope that they ask themselves as a living, breathing character.
Right. Yeah. 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 Because
Yeah.
you want to encourage the three-dimensionality of these characters,
hmm
and so yeah, that's
even if you get like even if you get like a 2.5 definition of the character, that's
yeah.
enough. That's usually enough to go on where you can push them into wanting to make it more three-dimensional and even further beyond, I think.
Yeah, 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 totally. That's great advice. That's really great advice. So,
Mhm.
when you're crafting your world, do you
Yeah.
start with the world or the villain first, the BBEG first?
For this one, I really like. I had some loose ideas of what I want. I think I had the structure and kind of the world first, and then I
Okay.
put the enemy faction that exists within it. It's easier for me to kind of do a baseline of how the world is existing. The one thing that I'm kind of doing for my overall campaign that I'm running with most people is what I call the Great Expansion, which is people
Which I
are
love, by the
growing in
way.
an
That's such a
exponential
great
rate.
name. Again, that's like the
It's
great,
no
best name.
every
Great
time I say, and then
expansion.
like you see it on the paper, TGE, the acronym, it looks so good.
Oh, that's
No,
so good.
I don't dare lose this because it's working really well and people really like it. But it gives that world of like stuff is moving exponentially growing, and because of that, monsters are pushing back more than ever, which is causing the rise of adventurers to be needed.
Mm.
Hence, a perfect tie-in to get
Hence,
anyone
they're
who doesn't really
there.
have a
Hence,
backstory to
the
be like,
players
I
show
need to
up.
be an
Yeah,
adventurer,
yeah, yeah.
and boom, the player, and
Great,
it makes it
perfect.
really easy. And so like that structure is infinitely easier for me to craft first, and then just to be like, and then there's some evil guys up here that really want the great expansion to keep happening, and then there's some people here who would like the great expansion to not be happening. If you have the structure of the world and kind of what you want the general politics is loaded, but like the politics and the ideals of the world to be, it makes it easy to put people in there that agree or disagree in those gray areas. It makes it easy.
Right, right. Like, so do you do like a binary good and evil, or do you make it more gray and ambiguous?
There's time for all.
Sure.
I think you need the mustache twirling villain to be able to allow your players to be like, I want to punch that guy in the face. It's easy.
Right.
It's easy to punch those guys. But like
Hmm.
and then you get the objectively good of like the soft loving barkeep that that if anybody does anything to her, we're lights out. We're taking everybody out with us.
Right.
But those gray areas are where you really start to get the players to not only ask questions about themselves, but about the world that they're in. You get people that kind of agree with both sides that will get and I've had it where like you get a really good role play moment of just like not only like DM to player in our characters, but when you light a fuse and then you just hear the players arguing about in-world politics
Right.
at the table with each other as
Great
their
moment.
characters, I sit with my arms crossed and I go, this is what it's all about. This is what I love to see. It's them coming with those issues that they could be facing in the real world, but they're letting this be the real world for those 3 hours that we're together.
I gotta say, like, that's some of my best DM moments when I'm actually not DMing. I'm just sitting back.
Exactly.
Like the players are like arguing about something in game, right? And like not like a rule set, but like some kind of political thing or what they're gonna do, like something like that. And it's like a really serious debate, and they're taking it very seriously. And it's like I just sit back and I'm like, yeah, I love this, you know, because
like, do we side with the guards or do we side with the thieves guild and steal the thing? It's like, no,
and they're
it's
just
perfect.
doing this
Excellent.
and they're doing this long debate and stuff, and I'm just like, this is great. I mean, DMs should allow that space, like, you know, like I feel like DMs have this need to sort of like, I need to tell this story. I have to tell this story a certain way, blah blah blah. And like, no, just if like you have those moments where players are just sort of going off on their own about it, just sit back, just put your hands up, just relax.
Just let them have it. Yep.
Go get a drink, go get a snack, something. Just
you
know, let them do their thing. I mean, you can still listen and just and if they have, because they'll have questions maybe that you can answer. So you need to be present, but like just let them do their player moment. Let them experience the world for themselves instead of you guiding it.
Exactly. And it's funny because I've had those moments where I just like sit back and let them do their thing. And like you said, those questions they ask are questions I didn't think about.
Oh yeah,
and so
always.
That, and then the DM screen hides a lot of stuff that I make up on the spot, because then I just sit there and go, yeah, no, those are good questions to ask, because I'm like scribbling down like, yes, that's good.
I'm furiously typing in my iPad. I'm like, oh, that's good. Like, no, like, hey, what are you typing over there? I'm just writing session notes. Don't worry.
Yep. I'm pre-rolling. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
It's just session notes. I'm just catching up on session notes. No worries. And I'm like, oh shit, I need to figure this out for next session.
No, because there's like kind of there's kind of that thing about like coding and learning different things like that, where the more eyes you have on it, the more mistakes and things you're gonna find, the more you do the thing. Yeah. And so like having more people, 4 to 6 people, depending on your table size, asking and thinking of more things about the world, you're going to find shortfalls. Even the most prepared DMs are going to find moments where like,
even the most prepared DM, you can't create an entire world that covers every scenario that a player is going to do. You just can't. And it's a waste of time to try to do that. It's such a waste because you don't know where they're going to go. And you're just going to be upset when they don't go somewhere where you've spent hours crafting. And it's like,
you're gonna burn yourself out.
You're gonna burn yourself out really quickly, and you're just gonna get tired of DMing because every session prep is gonna be this full-time job, you know, and you just nobody has time to do that, right? For a game. I mean, it's just impossible. So yeah, it's like I agree with you. I craft like a pretty loose sort of thing of the world. I like using, I know a lot of people don't, but I like using the pre-made modules, the pre-made campaigns, and then using that as a structure, and then I modify them where I think they're weak, you know, where I need to strengthen them, you know. And that was the thing I was telling you about the Tomb of Annihilation, which I'm currently running, and the hook is so bad. Like the hook is just horrible. It's the worst thing about the book. Otherwise, the book's pretty good, and the whole campaign's pretty well done, even though for a very loose sort of structure, hex crawl, very open world, like more open world than a lot of stuff. But the hook is just so bad. Like, do you do hooks yourself, or do do you care a lot about the hook, or do you just put people into the adventure? Like, how much thought goes into your hook?
For the hooks of the thing, I feel like I don't put a ton of brain power into it because I do a lot of surface level. Either kind of like what you did is for if anybody who looks at my Act One kind of structure, if they pop open the Acquisitions Incorporated module, they'll be like, hey, it's in Phandalin. Hey, there's an ogre fight. Now hold on a minute. A couple of those early things that starts to get a
Yeah.
little one for one because people who get paid a lot of money wrote that stuff. They know what's good for most players.
Yeah.
But like I'll take that and I'll also tie in like a character hook, a political of the town hook to kind of get you motivated in that. I'll try to think in like 4 or 5 different hooks, and if one of those is going to sync with a player. Some of them will hook with the same one. Some of those only hook with one. And even if none of those hit, as long as they have the bulletin board style structure of, hey, next thing on the list is go clear out the manor, that's going to get people who missed all of those to be like, I gamify, I know next thing I have to do.
Right.
And usually that pans out, and I don't get too many people that are like, what the heck do we do next? What's on our to do?
Yeah.
You know what
So
I
I
mean?
mean, sometimes
If
they
you if
need
you give
that.
them,
Sometimes you need to give them sort of a lead or whatever because players get
mhm,
lost in like, because I mean that happens in all kinds of open world games where it's just like
exactly.
and life because life is an open world game really, you know. But
Yep.
it's like yeah, it's like a lot of times I just don't know what to do next, and so you need some sort of
Yeah.
direction.
No, and allowing a lot of mystery to happen. I feel like and finding the balance between that. Like if you give them a question to answer within the world, their backstory, or both, if you're hopefully doing things enjoyably, that'll get people pushing forward either way. Like you start to create. You make those mysteries get deeper as you go, or at least deeper in a way,
Yeah.
while also getting answers. Like I'll give them a chalkboard with a bunch of science lingo that gives them some proper nouns for things, but
Right.
also erase one of the names of one of the big things that they still have to try to figure out. Keep hinting at certain time frames, like, oh, something happened a century ago. Man, about a century ago, this changed. Oh, about 100 years
Right.
ago. And
Right.
you keep kind of soft hitting those things, or keep soft mentioning names and things like that. And people will be like, hey, I keep hearing the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
What is that doing? And those questions will get people to jump into those setups that you've built.
Yeah, yeah, I'm doing that right now with one of my
Mm-hmm.
campaigns is I'm like from session 1 I've been like sort of randomly dropping the BBEG's name, you know, and even though he doesn't
So good.
because you know, he doesn't appear until the very end, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like you know, the way that it's written, you never hear his name until you get to the end, which is such a foolish thing to do because why would they like, why would they care about the bad guy then if they hadn't like heard about the stuff he's done sort of throughout
Exactly.
their existence? Yeah, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how like I when I stepped into your session or whatever, you were doing a great job of setting up, painting your world like theater of the mind with sort
Mm-hmm.
of your descriptions and stuff. How do you do descriptions to players? Like, what do you have a philosophy about that?
Like a specific philosophy is just allowing for any, if they're going to give me something, I take that and I put a spin on it that allows them to start feeling how much description they can put in the thing. If I'm describing like a scene or something, I like to hit like deep description with good adjectives that are not only like, the big tree, no, like the redwood sized tree with spindly branches and the roots that dig under the bubbling muddy
Mm,
swamp. Like, you get a little bit of those descriptors, those, and we've chatted about, you want to hit the senses of people. You want to hit like a couple. You want to hit sound. You want to hit feel.
yeah,
You want
the
to hit.
five
You're hitting
senses.
sight,
You
of
want to hit
course.
the five main
If you can
senses. Yeah.
if you can get a few of those, it's going to draw people in.
Yep.
And there are some people that hook more with certain senses. And so if
Yeah.
you're able to touch on at least 3 or 4 of the 5,
Yeah.
that's going to get people that are like really interested in the way you're describing things. And one thing that I've really been honing in on as I've been DMing over this time is descriptions of battle things. There's
Mm,
nothing that I as a player get more kind of tuned down with is when I'm in the middle of a battle and I say I'm gonna stab the rat or whatever. And they just go, okay, you go in and you stab the rat. Okay. And that's your turn. And like that, and like for a certain table that can be fine. Sometimes you're just getting in the nitty gritty. You don't want a battle to take 2 hours of your session. I get it. But for me, like if somebody's like, I want to use my sickle on this wolf, I'm like, okay, you take this sickle, you take the sickle and you drive it down into the nape of this wolf as it spits out some blood on the floor, but grits its teeth at you angrily. You really kind of fill out how this battle lives and how it's like, it can be gruesome. And like, I think some of that gruesomeness early on is a way to get players to realize how it's not all zany, and push them to be like, do I want to be a little less lethal with some of these? Because non-lethal stuff does exist. And if they do some really grotesque stuff and I see their jaw drop as I describe this, then I go, well, next time, if you don't want to kill that bad guy, you can say you don't want to do that and just hit him with your big bad fist.
Right, exactly. And that's really good advice. And that's something I need to get better at. Like, because for me, when we're doing combat a lot, like it's, like especially with this latest combat that I just did, and I talked about it a little bit with you yesterday, with the siege combat where it was like this, like lots of combatants and stuff. There was just so much for me to do as a DM to sort of run this thing. Like I was finding that my descriptors of the battle were sort of suffering because, I was constantly sort of thinking about the next like sort of chore that I had to do to make this battle run effectively and to keep up with all my initiative trackers and stuff like that, and just so much. And so it's hard sometimes. Like, how do you, I mean, I guess it just takes practice, right? To sort of get into that and like take a moment to sort of breathe, like don't feel rushed. In other words, like just allow yourself more space.
I completely agree. It's really easy. I have this blue notebook that has turned into my D&D notebook that's just filled with random pages of scribbles of different initiative orders and battle damage and stuff like that. And that it's very easy to get locked in the notebook and doing the numbers and trying to make sure that all stuff is on the good. You can start to falter at some of that descriptors and some of those things that players really find enjoyable about that. So I completely agree. Finding the balance, or usually for me, if I find myself I'm about to do a big battle, I'll like really, really script in some of those descriptor things and some of those big moments. Like if you're doing a siege, like the ogre smashes down and levels half the people, I'll make sure I write a descriptor out for when that happens. So I don't have to make that up on the spot like I do with a lot of my, battle descriptors. And so like it's about finding that balance of prep versus wordplay.
Yeah, and that's what I did. I had like some scripted moments that I just, like, okay, I got to read this text box, and then just try not to make it obvious that I was reading, but like just to make sure I had some descriptors in there of like the gruesomeness of this battle,
Exactly.
And killing lots of NPCs, which
people love, I bet.
People love, yeah. No name NPC guards. Lots of no name NPC guards died in that battle. Like pour one out for them later.
Exactly.
So like, not all the time players respond to sort of your stories, right? Or like I know it's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you. I'm sure it's happened to everybody. Like we've sort of crafted something and we put it out there and we think they're going to just like go nuts for it. And we sort of get like a tepid response sometimes. Like what do you do? How do you keep that from feeling personal? Like,
There's definitely different weights to it, because there's definitely stuff that you can put a lot of effort in and it goes unnoticed, and that stuff can feel really bad. But I would say more of a low stake example of this is I just ran with that group you saw last Saturday. I ran my usual campaign, and there's a moment where they help this runt wolf of the litter kind of go against their group of wolves who is mean to them. And at the end of it, there's a moment where you can recruit this runt wolf into your party and have him grow and stuff like that. I've had the first 2 of 3 parties do it, and this third one, they showed no interest in adopting this individual. They even like they almost used him as bait to potentially get a magic
How
item from the
cruel.
den
How
of wolves
mean.
that
That's
existed.
very
No,
mean.
it was a really
Jeez.
it was a really fun moment, and it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, this poor wolf named James, who in these other groups has been fleshed out as his own character and kind of has his own motivations and stuff. Now I see these players that are like, anyway, bye. Hope you do okay in the woods. And I laugh in the moment as I'm like, wow, I'm surprised. He gives them the literal puppy dog eyes. They say, anyway, good luck out there, big dog. It's all you. And you, as a DM with this NPC I created, you have to allowing that to laugh off and kind of shift over. And what I think can be most important for new GMs or DMs who can feel a little bit of strife or a little bit of feel a little upset when that happens. What happened to that? What happens to James after they say no? Does he wallow off, never to be seen again? Or does he run into the god of the hunt and decide to be his side companion when this lower deity brings him onto his entourage? That the party later has to fight this large wolf of a god. That are like, who is this?
And that makes the moment even better, because when you I love these moments when you drop something right into the story and you think the players are going to run with it, and then they don't, and then but they sort of remember, and then later on, a couple sessions later, it comes back full force, the consequences of their actions, and it's and they go, what, and players have done that. They freak out when I've brought in these elements from sessions ago. And they thought I forgot about him. Oh, no, I didn't forget about it.
No. So I like to say, if you set up a really cool thing that players don't notice or players don't sink their teeth into,
you have another opportunity to bring it up.
Allow yourself the opportunity for that to come forward, and make sure not to make it come back with malice. The last thing you want to do is turn an NPC into a god that can nuke the player's turn one. You don't want you're giving them a new gift with this cool new story thing that you crafted, and that they have to reap what they sow a little bit.
Well, it's really a gift for both of you. It's a gift for the players and the DM. And so, don't make it about malice or revenge. It's not that. It's an opportunity for you to think of your story differently, and for you to think outside the box. You're asking your players to think outside the box all the time, but it's an opportunity for you to go, they didn't bite into this NPC. What are the consequences of that? How can I make that come up later? Let's play that scenario forward and see how would the players run into this in the future, and what has happened since then. And that has the added benefit of making your world feel very alive. That stuff happens when outside of the immediate preview of the characters. Stuff happens and the world goes on. So it's a great opportunity. Is it okay for you as a DM to admit mistakes?
It has to be. We're gonna slip up. We're gonna rule of cool ourselves a little too much, and kind of like we talked about earlier, a player's gonna call us on it. A player's gonna be like, "Hey, that seems a little too loose," or I don't think you can do that. And you'll either have to double down and say "Sorry, DM rules. I made this for story reasons. Trust me," or be like, "You know what? You're right. I messed up there." And you can either do. We kind of talked about it before, but you can either do a pause in the session and be like, "Yep, you're right," and kind of rewrite history a little bit. Use a little bit of a rewind button usually doesn't break the stuff too much, depending on how deep you got. If it's a character dying, that might get a little people might not like that too much. But if it's a small wording choice or a dice roll of a perception check missed, nobody's gonna care. Allowing yourself to be wrong and allowing yourself to shift in the ways that will benefit the players, that'll benefit you more than you sticking your foot down and being wrong. You know what I mean? And so we have to be humble in order for flow to continue, I think.
No, I completely agree. I think it's okay if we're I don't know everything. I'm sorry. I don't know everything. I don't know every word of the player's handbook and the DMG. I don't know every monster stat block, verbatim. I'm going to mess up sometimes, and that's okay. And I have the same grace for my players too, because if they're going to mess up, I'm like, look, because they'll be like, "Oh, I meant to do this. I meant like, and I'll be like, yeah, okay, look, no problem. Like, you know,
Hmm.
let's go with it.
For newer players, I'll allow one or two of those, and
Yeah.
if we're at level 12, I'll be like, you knew better. You
I
know what I mean?
mean, yeah,
But
you
like for
can't
newer
do it
players,
every
you got to allow
time,
that
right?
breadth. No,
Yeah.
of course, and that all depends. That's all situational. But no, and like if someone asks, like if a player asks a question and I don't have the answer for it, like
Right.
story wise, lore
Right.
wise, or whatever, something that I've been okay with is being like, hey, let me give you a real answer to that. Give me till next week. And usually players are fine with that. And you can even write it in the story that you say, like, your character has to do a little bit of research on this before you find the real answer. Go to the
Yeah, that's a
library.
very
And
good
that
way to
takes like,
do it, sort of story
it
wise.
takes
Yeah.
like an in-universe
Yeah.
day of 1 week for you as a real person. So it usually
Right.
works out that way. And then you can put a little more effort into that. And maybe that turns into a whole side quest or something. It always,
Yeah, you
that's
never
always how it
know.
goes.
You never know where it's going to go. Being open
Mhm.
to where the story goes, which sort of leads me into the next, I think it's going to be the last question, or maybe the second last question. Like
Sure.
the principle of yes and, the old improv
Yeah.
sort of scenario, right?
Yep.
Like try to say yes and way more than you say no. Like very rarely should you be saying no. It should
Like 2
be,
out of 100 times, usually at most,
yeah.
am I saying like
And
an
usually
actual
only if
hard
it's like
no.
rule breaking, right? Like just really
Yep.
breaks your world or something like that. But so
Yep.
just like tell me about the philosophy of yes and, like how you try to incorporate it into your games.
I mean, how I try to incorporate it as best as I can is like I kind of said, I find the most joy with new players because I usually see them push boundaries
Mm,
a lot more than some seasoned players can because they know the routine, they know what they're going for. Some people have, their character mapped from 1 to 12, they're just going to get there.
right.
When you get new players and they're able to toss really exciting ideas at you, or like, exciting because they're thoughtful. Like I had a big ogre fight and they were like, I have 50 feet of rope. Can I Star Wars AT-AT wrap around this thing's leg and trip it over? And I'm like, that's hilarious.
Let's
I'm like,
do it.
yes,
I would totally agree with that. Yeah.
there's no role on this that's gonna make it work, but we're gonna say like you use your action to dash and you do a quick
Mm,
strength check to see if you can wrap it around this thing's
yeah,
leg.
yeah.
It's that easy. For us as DMs, usually we have more of a understanding of kind of the mechanics and of the skills than newer players or even some existing players will. And so bending some of those to match what the insanity that players want to do. Because if that succeeds, people are going to talk about it for a real long time. They're going
Yeah,
to
it's
talk
gonna
about
be
how they tripped
epic.
that ogre and then they all
Epic.
jumped it while it was on the ground.
Right.
Or if it misses, it's going to be like, oh, you tried to wrap the rope around that giant's leg and it kicked you a quarter mile. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah.
those things, like those successes and fails all came because you said yes to the wacky thing that they wanted to do. And so saying like just allowing those cool things to happen and adding to it with the and is really important. You say yes, and if you do so, they're gonna be prone, and then you
Right.
all get advantage on its hit. And so like it gives players more of that incentive to take more risks, to push against what they see on the page more and
Mm,
against what they thought the game even could be. Some people, you get that moment of a new player where they are like, can I just leave, or can I just like punch this guy? And I'm like,
yeah.
yeah. The
Yeah.
banker guy with these perfect silver cufflinks is talking about this grandiose idea
Mm,
about making money off of people. Like, I want to punch this guy. I'm like, sure,
okay,
go
do it.
ahead. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, whatever. It's gonna
Yeah.
and
It's gonna
it's
have
gonna cause
consequences. Yeah,
it's
but
gonna have consequences. And allowing those consequences to also be yes anded from you and the player is
yeah.
gonna be important because that's gonna push that story more, and it can kick off things a lot faster and a lot more fun than you even intended.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I always tell players like when they ask questions like that, new players, right? Even old players, sometimes they do, but like you say, like more experienced players, they sort of know like kind of what they can, attempt and stuff, and and usually they have a plan for their characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a better sense of their characters, right? New players are really like they're still finding out their characters, they're still finding their role playing voice,
Mm-hmm.
but like they'll ask me like, "Can I do this?" And I'm like, "You can do anything you want. Like
Mm-hmm.
whether you're successful or not is really the question because like
Yep.
if you say you want to, I mean, if I was here and I said, "Oh, I want to jump to the moon," I mean, I could go out in the front yard now and try it. Like,
Yeah.
I doubt I would succeed, right? But I could definitely try it. So you can
Yeah.
try anything you want, and we'll just go with
Exactly. No,
that.
and yeah, you could say like I wanna jump to the moon. I'd say like, yeah, you could try that, but like you're gonna need a lot more propulsion than a jump. Like what you could probably talk to some scientists
Right.
around town, see if anybody's building a rocket somewhere. You know what I mean? Like
See, I would
you
say,
could start to
I
set
would
that up.
say, I would do it like your character goes out and starts jumping up and down, like frantically. And you notice,
Oh
like,
god.
and then roll a perception check. Okay, well, you start noticing that people are looking at you strangely like you're a mad person.
Yeah, you're out here just training your high jump or something,
Yeah,
I guess.
right.
No, see, it can lead to those really funny moments and can push them to kind of learn the boundaries of how far they can push before the real world gravity of the situation can kind of start to push them
Literally,
back into that.
literally, I see what you did there.
Literally.
Literally, the gravity of the situation.
Thank you,
Yeah,
thank you.
that was very
That's why
good.
I'm in
That's why
the
you
profession.
do
Man.
improv as a DM.
Exactly. Oh shoot.
So, well, I
Yeah, no,
mean,
yeah.
that's been pretty good. Like, is there anything else that you want to add or anything else you want to talk about that we didn't cover? Like,
It was there. Did we get any questions in the chat at all?
no, no questions. These people are really
No way.
some,
No,
they feel really difficult role playing questions, I guess. I don't know.
it's hard. It's hard. Questions
It's
can be hard to
hard.
give us, especially
It's
when we're
hard.
answering these ones so well.
Especially the
No,
first one. To be
I
the
just
first one is tough. I don't like being the first one
right.
either.
I really think that it's it's important for us as GMs, kind of like I've said before, is to stay humble,
Yeah.
keep our pride in check. We can be good at what we do, and we can have pride and joy in what we're bringing to the table, especially for some of these people if they really get into it and stuff. But allow yourself those moments to be humble, to take people's criticisms and to
Yeah.
take people's non-enjoyment as a way to either push yourself forward or move a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so my background is creative writing in college. Like, I did English creative
Cool.
writing. And that's one of the hardest things you have to learn when you're trying to do some kind of artistic endeavor like that, right? We had a lot of my classes were writing workshops where we'd literally pass out a story and have just our classmates like critique it.
Critique it. Yep.
Like the whole
Yep.
class would be about critiquing my story or something like that. And it's like, that's really tough, and you have to have a thick skin for that. You have to be able to like listen to the criticism,
Mm-hmm.
and just be like, look, this is constructive. This is actually trying to help me. And
Yeah.
they'd have to write out like a lot of these, they'd have to write out their criticisms and then give it to me, or their critiques, I should say. So I'd look at them, and the ones that were really like complimentary of my stories or, painted in a very good light, I like threw away. I didn't keep those.
It's nice, but
Yeah.
for you need that criticism to help
Yeah.
break and reshape things to be stronger and better. You do.
Yeah, yeah. I just threw those away. Like, the only ones that I kept and actually reread several times were the ones that were more critical in a constructive
Mhm.
way, not in a mean way or anything, but like,
Of course.
because there's ways to do it, not constructive, but hopefully everybody's doing it constructive. But yeah, that was the only ones I kept, and those really helped me. They made me a
They
better
do.
storyteller. So
Mhm.
I think that's really valuable advice. Be humble as a DM. Know that you're learning, like you're going to continue to learn and improve
Yep.
this craft, this skill. This is a skill that you're teaching yourself like any other skill. And there is so much to learn because it's so open and there's no one right way to do things.
Mhm. To let yourself be humble in that, and to if you find yourself taking that chance and shifting your style in a way that's different than what you've been used to, the moment you see a smile or a laugh from a player that's worked on,
Yeah.
it makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
All the work it took to shift that's what it's about.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. I get a lot of joy out of seeing my players get joy and experience the story that I'm trying to tell and get really into it. And it's great when every once in a while, this doesn't happen all the time, but every once in a while, months later or maybe a year later, you'll be hanging out with players, like some of your, because they're your friends, a lot of them are your friends, and they'll just bring up like this story from D&D that they remember. They still remember
Yep.
that. That's so great. Like they
No,
still, they're
for me,
telling it
that
like it
biggest
happened to
moment
them.
was exactly for me. That biggest moment was for me, like crafting battles that are more enjoyable and more thoughtful than just hit the wolf has been something I've been trying to improve on myself.
Yeah, that's a
And
skill to
I was
do.
hanging out with a party of mine, and they were like, "No, one of my favorite moments from this whole campaign so far was this really really close call battle." I sat back and I went, "If that's what they're liking the most, and that's what I've been trying to improve on the most in this campaign, that felt really good. It felt really vindicating, and it's nice to be able to share that and
That's
laugh
great.
at some
Yeah.
of the really close call rolls that you had during that battle. It's a great thing."
That's a little validation. And like, and
Yeah.
this, I think this is great. Like talking to other DMs, everybody should go and talk to their fellow DMs and get other opinions because, you know, you've made me realize that like I need to get better at my descriptions of battles. Like I need to get better with, describing hits and stuff like that. And which I'm not because I get too caught up sort of in the math of it, the math of
Of course.
combat or whatever, and making sure that that all runs effectively, right? That I lose a little bit of the storytelling, and so it's valuable for me to hear from you, like, okay, well, yeah, I recognize that that's something I need to improve on. So,
No, and see exactly. It's learning from other DMs, and the videos that I've been watching. Shameless plug to your channel. The videos I watched from one
plug
of
it
yours,
out,
you
plug it
talked
away.
about yeah.
Everybody watch my
One of the
channel.
videos you you talked about in one of your videos of like finding the right moments to put the nice NPCs in peril that will
Yeah.
help drive. And I'm like, I never put Susanna in a dangerous situation. And I need to start putting some of these NPC situations where they could actually beef it. And
Yeah.
and that's, you learn that just talking to other people in the thing. It helps.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, and see, that's what I'm good at. I'm good at putting NPCs in
Mm-hmm.
peril. I love it. And if they die, it makes a really powerful moment where the players are just like, oh, they feel
Mm-hmm.
really like it's a gut punch to them. And sometimes those gut
It is.
punches are pretty good. So, um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
well, thank you so much, Cole. I really appreciate your
Thank you.
time.
Yeah.
If other people want to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you now? Like, how do people get in touch with you?
Like I said, there's ColTheDM, which you see on here on this
Yep, the
live, and I'm
link the
sure we'll
link
post
will
it
be
other
in the
places.
description. Yeah, for the YouTube for your
If any of
YouTube.
you if any of you are local Arizona, I'm at Strange Adventures. It's a small comic shop in a outdoor mall. And otherwise, you can find me my first and last name Cole Stevens, spelled PH, on socials and stuff. I'm not on all the time, but if you really want to reach out to me, you can message me through those.
Yeah, great. I told you you're gonna have to be more on socials now because now you're YouTube
I'll have to
famous.
if he, yeah, right. Yeah, big shot over here, exactly. No, but always feel free.
That's great, man. Well, thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to me. I really appreciate it. This
Anytime.
has been really valuable for me. I hope it's been valuable for the people listening. Um, and I hope to do more of these series. So I have a couple of DMs other DMs that I want to talk to and bring this up. Like one's written, I told you he's written a book on like a monster stat book, new creatures.
Very cool.
That's published and it's really nice. Like the art, like it's amazing. It's a really great book and the creatures in it are really fantastic. Um, and so I'm talking with him about bringing him on and stuff like this because I think this is so valuable. Like I sort
It
of
is.
do my channel and like the things that I say in my channel are my opinions and the way that I sort of run the game, right? But like there's just so many ways you can do it that are right. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really it's really valuable to get just the feedback from other people and see how they do it and find out what works for you and your group because not no one thing is going to work for everybody, right?
No,
So
absolutely.
all right. Well, thank you very much, Cole. I really appreciate you. Let me queue up my next thing here. And be sure to like and subscribe. And go check out Cole. Your YouTube link is going to be in the descriptions, and any other socials you have, just give them to me and I'll make sure it ends up in the descriptions. And
Cool. Appreciate it.
like and subscribe. I really appreciate everybody watching. Thank you very much. May all your rolls be nat 20s, and I'll talk to you later.